Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the session Java on Mobile, Write Once, Run on iOS and Android. My name is Paul Anderson, and this is Gail Anderson, and we're happy to have everybody here today. Okay, so who are we? Gail and I own a training company in the United States, and we do courses for private industry and government in Java 8 and JavaFX. We are the authors of the textbook JavaFX Rich Client Programming on the NetBeans platform. And Gail and I also have done some live lesson videos from Pearson Education, and that would be, as you see here, JavaFX Programming and Java Reflection. And Gail and I are also members of the NetBeans Dream Team. Okay, here's our agenda for today. And before we begin, I wanted to tell you guys that this is pretty exciting stuff that we're doing here because Java is able to run on mobile now, and you're not going to see one line of Swift code or Objective-C, and we're not going to be doing any threads or concurrency or a lot of low-level type stuff because we're using these frameworks that we're going to discuss. And you can develop your mobile applications all in Java and with JavaFX, and it's pretty exciting stuff. So we have some cool things to show you today. All right, so for our agenda, we're going to start off by saying why would you want to use JavaFX for mobile, and why you would want to do this from being able to work with one code base in Java and JavaFX and be able to deploy to iOS platforms or Android. To do this, we're going to introduce to you the Gluon Framework, and we'll show you why you want to use this framework because it does a lot of things for you. And we'll also use the NetBeans IDE today to show you our demos. Of course, you can also use Eclipse and IntelliJ with the Gluon Framework, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we'll move and we'll show you our first demo, which is a kind of a fun little quiz game that we made up. And it's a good way to learn about the framework and the organization of a mobile application with this approach. And it also uses Gluon Maps, which I think you'll like. In this demo application, we'll dive into FXML and the Gluon charm controls, and we'll show you a little bit about how they're used and introduce this to you in our first simple demo program. We then want to talk a little bit more about the importance of JavaFX Properties, right, and why listeners and bindings make it so easy to do these UIs and handle the complexities of the UI controls that you have to do. Then we'll move to a second demo, which is a little more advanced and uses Gluon charm controls as well as JavaFX controls. And this one I think you'll like because we have some visualizations that are going on with JavaFX charts. So you'll actually see a line chart and a bar chart, all standard JavaFX components, and we have those integrated into that demo as well. Then we'll talk about Gluon's Connect framework and talk about how you can persist data on the phones and the mobile devices. And then we'll move to Gluon Connect and Gluon Cloud Link, which are products that let you connect to the cloud or web services in addition to local device storage. And we'll talk about setting up clients for data synchronizations with objects and lists of data. And we'll also show you how easy it is to do remote binding with Gluon's libraries. That'll be interesting for you to see as well. We then have a third demo to show you that will require user authentication for accessing data in the cloud. And we do have our devices connected to the web here in this room, so hopefully we'll be able to make that all work for you. We'll demonstrate how you can limit access to the cloud data on the devices, and we'll also show you, we'll actually do a user authentication for you this morning using Twitter. Moving on, we'll then talk about another framework that we think works really well here with mobile development, and that's the Afterburner framework. And Afterburner was developed by Adam Bean. A lot of you might know who he is, and we're using it for FXML and dependency injection. And then we'll go over some platform-specific tips for you, things that we can point out when you're targeting for Android and the iOS platforms. We'll tell you about some of our experiences and some tips and techniques. And then we'll wrap it up at the end with a link to the code that we're going to make available. We're going to make that available later today, I think, or
later
tonight.
Today.
Yeah, and you guys will be able to go to our website and you can take a look at the code for all the demos that you're going to see today. And then we'll take questions and answers at the end. Now there is a break too, so we're going to talk for a while here, and then we'll take a half-hour break, and then we'll come back and finish up. Okay, so let's get started. All right, now why would you want to use JavaFX on mobile, right? Well, the problem is that a lot of developers right now in companies that are doing mobile development, companies are forced to have two sets of developers, right? One set of developers that are developing for the iOS, and they're either using Objective-C or they're using Swift maybe, and then the other developers that are working on Android are using Java, but it's mostly a Java 7, and they're not going to be using a lot the things that you're going to see today, because we're using a lot of Java 8 in our examples, and you'll see Lambda expressions and method references and other things. So the problem is that there's two separate code platforms that have to be maintained, and then there's all problems with the target platforms being different, and it's a big hassle to do. And our approach here is if you use JavaFX and you use Java, then you have a platform with one code base, and then you can deploy it to these different target platforms. Now, Gluon addresses this problem by providing a development framework that lets you target these different devices, and all from the same code base. And the cool thing about the framework is that it hides all the messy details, and it does this by giving you an IDE plugin that you can use with, like I said, NetBeans, Eclipse, and IntelliJ. And for builds for the development, we're using Gradle. Now, the reason why JavaFX then is of use on the mobile is because Gluon is taking care of the device-specific stuff, and therefore you can leverage the many valuable features that JavaFX has to offer. And these would include things that you see here on the slide. For example, the scene graph metaphor, the ability to manipulate nodes, and FXML, which helps you separate your view from the model and controller. And also JavaFX has tasks that let you handle the asynchronous background executions that are so important in UIs, and also with observable entities, JavaFX Properties, which let you to use listeners and binding techniques. And of course, you can also use event handlers to respond to actions and other events. Okay, so what is this Gluon framework, and who is Gluon anyway? Well, first a disclosure. Gail and I do not work for Gluon. Gluon is actually a commercial company based right here in Belgium, and they provide products and services for developers like you and like us. And today what we want to do is show you how we use some of these products to develop the JavaFX demo applications that you're going to see. Now, Gluon also supports open source projects and offers access to all of their products using a free license, although the free license does have some restrictions. So the thing to remember is today this is just a technical presentation and not a sales pitch. Our goal here is to show you how we use the Gluon framework to solve technical problems in mobile development. Okay, so before we start showing you the demos and some code, let's talk a little bit about a high-level diagram of the Gluon framework. As you can see up here on the screen, the Gluon framework includes Gluon Mobile, which is Java and JavaFX libraries that let you create mobile applications. And the library provides access to the native environment too, so as well as Gluon Cloud Link for persisting data in the cloud. And you can also, through the Gluon framework, access third-party services like AWS from Amazon. The Gluon framework has many other features that help you develop mobile apps with JavaFX as well. For example, they provide mobile-targeted UI controls that are specifically skinned using guidelines from material design. And Gluon has also taken over the stewardship of Scene Builder, which is a really nice drag-and-drop tool that you can use to lay out your UIs. And of course, Scene Builder generates the FXML code for you. Gluon Framework also has data synchronization APIs, and they provide library support for the low-level things that you have to do on the devices too. For example, accessing the camera and the accelerometer and so forth. All right, so what are the steps for you to set up a development environment with Gluon and get started? Okay, the first thing you do is you install the Gluon plugin in your favorite IDE. And today we're going to use NetBeans. And this Gluon plugin will also install Gradle for you, unless you already have Gradle installed on your system. Now, just with this plugin, you can begin to create mobile applications that run on the desktop, and that's how you can use the desktop for debugging. And the plugin includes the Charm library of controls. And once again, these controls are specifically skinned so they look good on mobile environments, and they're really easy to use. Now, there is the free license will give you what's called a nag screen, so that when you run your application, you'll have the screen that comes up. You'll have to close, but you can remove that with a paid license to Gluon. Now, the supported targets from the framework here are iOS, which of course includes iPhone and iPad tablets, Android, and even embedded, by the way. We're not going to do anything with the Raspberry Pi this morning, but you can also develop mobile apps for that platform as well. And then, of course, the desktop, which you'd want to use for debugging. Okay, let's discuss what you would need now to get started with these different mobile targets. Okay, so suppose you want to develop for iOS. Okay? All right, well, the first thing you need is a Mac. And if you have a PC, sorry, you'll have to get a Mac. You'll also want to use OS X 10.9 or later with Xcode installed and configured. And remember that Xcode is Apple's development tool and includes the ability to provision the application specifically for the iOS device. Now, the Mac up here that Gail's going to be running for you is running El Capitan, which is OS X 10.11.6, and she has 16 gigs of memory on her laptop. You'll also need Apple provisioning, and an Apple developer's license is currently $99 a year, but Apple also offers provisioning. All right, now what does Gluon do to make all of this work? When you launch to a connected iOS device, Gluon is using the Apache Harmony class libraries for Java support and the RoboVM AOT, ahead-of-time compiler, to turn the Java bytecodes into the native iOS code. And then the application is then installed and launched on the connected iOS device. Okay, and we'll talk more about these technologies in a few minutes. Sorry. All right, now what do you need to deploy to Android targets? Well, you need a few more things. First of all, you'll need to install the Android SDK Manager, and these will give you the required build tools that you need. For example, the Android SDK platform and the Android support library. And some of the required libraries are older versions, but the Gluon instructions are pretty clear about what you need to do. And the good news is you can continue to use your Mac for Android development as well. Now, the second thing is you'll need to configure Gradle so that it finds the Android top-level directory that contains the support libraries that you need. And this just means creating a Gradle.properties file and setting the Android underbar home property to the correct path. So when you launch to a connected Android device, what actually happens? Again, Gluon bundles the Apache Harmony Java class libraries and then optimizes the bytecodes for the Android target. And there's a Dalvik runtime on the device that converts this to the native code. Now, currently, there are some limitations with the Gluon framework that you might want to be aware of. For example, the Apache Harmony class libraries are implemented right now with mostly Java 7. However, you can use lambdas because Gluon has a plugin that converts these lambda expressions to inner classes. So when we show you code today, you guys will see a lot of lambdas that are being used in our code. And by the way, this plugin is called Retro Lambda, if you're interested. Now, you can't use streams yet in Java 8, but you can use the new Java 8 date and time classes, although not all of the methods are available, and there are a lot of them. Now, the Gluon framework currently uses both the RoboVM and Apache Harmony libraries, But because of their limitations on older Java versions, Gluon is now focusing on replacing these with a product called Gluon VM, which is based on the OpenJDK 9 mobile project. And this is in the near future, but not only will you be able to use all of Java 8 with this, including streams as well as lambdas, but support will also move to Java 9, and you'll be able to use the standard Java SDK. All right, so that's enough for me to talk here. I'm going to turn it over to Gail, and she's going to show you how easy it is to create a Gluon project. We're going to use NetBeans for the IDE here, and then she'll talk a little bit about the structure, and that'll allow us to get started for the other demos. Okay?
Hi, welcome. So first what I'm going to do for you is go through and create a sample mobile project that you get with the Gluon plugin. And again, here, as Paul said, we're using NetBeans IDE, but this is also appropriate for IntelliJ or Eclipse. And we just want to show you basically the steps and the structure of the projects. As we show you our other demos, then it'll be easier to see the similar structures. So in NetBeans, to create a new project, we say New Project. And because we've installed the Gluon plugin, we get the Gluon options for creating a project. And we're going to choose the multi-view project with FXML. And FXML is a XML-like markup language that allows you to describe your views. And it's a very convenient way to separate your view from your model and controller. And we think it's a great way to organize JavaFX applications. Okay, we're going to provide a name.
You've misspelled it, Gluon.
Oh.
Well, yeah, put the L in there. There you go. There you go.
Okay, so we provide a name, location, and we accept the default for the Android, iOS, and desktop platforms. We're not going to do embedded today. And when you come up with a multi-view project, you are given the option of naming your views. We're just going to keep the defaults. And for each view, you can optionally have a CSS file that can be styled just for that view, as well as a project-wide CSS file. And we're going to accept the defaults here. And since we've chosen FXML, we have the option of using the Afterburner framework. And in this short demo, we're not going to use it, but we'll use it for some of our other demos and talk more about that later. So we're going to finish up. Okay, things were opened. Okay, so what we're going to do now is simply run it so you can see what it looks like. And here's your NAG screen. We have a license, but we removed it for this talk because it's too difficult to not show the license files and things in the code. Okay, so this is what it looks like on the desktop, and you can see it's kind of skinned to look like a mobile application. Gluon gives you an app bar at the top, and you can configure this however you want. Here we have a navigation drawer in which we can change to the secondary view, and you see how it bounces in. And so they have animations that you can easily bounce in views. That gives a nice feel. This component down here is called a floating action button, and it sits on top. Let's go back to the primary view. And with the standard template, we didn't change anything here, has a label and a button. The button has text and also an icon. If you push the button, then the text changes to Hello JavaFX Universe. Okay, so we're going to quit this, and I just want to show you a little bit about the structure, and we'll make some simple changes. So under the source packages, we have the the main application, and the main application extends mobile application, which is a Gluon class that is similar to the JavaFX application that provides the necessary startup for the JavaFX thread and the runtime support. Then under views, each view has both a view class, which is responsible for loading calling the FXML loader, reading in the FXML code, and instantiating the view, and the presenter class, which is the controller. And we'll look at those later. Okay, and then because this is a Gradle project, there is a build.gradle file that allows you to configure how Gradle builds your project. And most of the time you don't need to reconfigure that. Like I said, Gluon builds the structure and provides the necessary structure for you. Under resources, we have the FXML source, and we have the CSS that's for each view. So what I'm going to do now is bring up Scene Builder, which is a standalone program that allows you to use drag and drop to configure your FXML view. And here's our view, and we can click on various components, so here you see the button consists of an icon as well. So we're going to make a really simple modification, and we're going to let's see, change. Okay, oh, I know it.
Yeah, there it is.
We're going to change the font size. And we'll
save it.
Save it, and we'll quit. God damn it.
Here we go.
Do the quit, yeah, do the quit. Thank you. Okay, so we'll
show them the FXML, right?
Okay, so here's the FXML, which you can also edit if you want to in your IDE's editor, and you can see that the label has a new font attribute which says 18. And now we're going to look at the controller code, and any element that you've defined in your FXML that you'd like to access from your controller code, you annotate with the @FXML annotation. So here we have both the view and the label, and in the FXML, our button specified the button click method to be invoked when we click it. And here you see the, okay.
Oh.
Here you see the Hello JavaFX Universe text, and we're going to change this just to show you another change. Okay, so and let's go ahead and rerun.
Get rid of the next screen.
Okay, so you see the label now is larger, and we click on the button, and it says Hello JavaFX. Okay.
Okay, great.
So it takes
Okay, so we're going to go back to the slides now.
as soon as I close everything
And
up.
Gail's going to close everything up. So what you saw here was a very simple way to create the project using the NetBeans, using the plugin from Gluon. And you saw a little bit about the structure of what it looks like. So now we're going to move on here and talk about the Gluon Mobile a little bit more. Okay, so you saw the NetBeans IDE, and you also got to see some FXML and the ability to use Scene Builder for drag and drop. And by the way, you can go into the FXML and make modifications and then and be able to propagate that back to your scene builder tool as well. That's all part of using the IDE. And Gail also showed you some CSS files, so you have both application-wide CSS and specific CSS files, so you can skin your components to make them look however you want. Remember that Gluon library has UI controls that have been tuned specifically for the mobile environment. For example, as you'll see later, they have alert dialogues and also a very nice charm list view component, highly configurable, and we'll be demonstrating those later on in some other demos. Now, the Gluon control, let me just mention one thing about the Gluon controls also follow the material design guidelines. And I don't know if you guys know much about material design, but this is a Google published document that helps designers create views that are both intuitive and also very practical and useful for mobile applications. And as we mentioned before, remember that the Gluon APIs also let you get to the low-level areas of the phone, of the phone as well, the underlying hardware and so forth. Okay. All right. Now we showed you, we just created a very simple project here, right? But now we'd like to move to our first demo, and we like this. This was fun to put together. This is our little quiz that we put together. It's called Capital Punishment, and we're going to bring it up right now, and we're going to show you what you can do, with the Gluon Framework and with JavaFX. So I'm going to turn it back over to Gail, and she'll fire up this application right now. And what this application does is a little quiz that helps you, figure out what the capitals are for countries in the world. So here it is, and you can see we have a globe in the middle, and we have a timer in the top left. We have a button for the start, and you have 5 questions to answer. So let's try the first one. And by the way, we expect somebody in the audience to help us out here.
Before we start the quiz, we're just going to, this we said before is a floating action button, and it is a map icon. It's a folding map. So if you click on this, you're taken to the map view. And since we knew we were going to be in Belgium, we put the capital of Brussels there. So this is also meant to be a learning quiz. So if you don't know the answer, you can go to the maps and see where it is. But as we run the quiz, you'll notice that the map button and the get the new question button will be disabled during the quiz. Now note that you have, this is a progress indicator, the blue circle, and it will change as we go through, and you have 10 seconds. So what is the capital of Tajikistan?
Timer's running.
Oh, the timer, you're supposed to answer. Okay, the timer went out, so that's good. We wanted to show you, A, how the timer worked, and B, what happens when the timer runs out. So we get one of Gluon charm controls, which is called a side pop-up view, and it can pop up from or slide in from any side. Here we slide it in from the bottom, and we decorate it as however we want using JavaFX, and we just tell you that the answer is Dushanabi. Okay, so if you notice that the background becomes opaque when a pop-up comes into view, and if we click anywhere in the background, it goes away. All right, let's do another one. Kenya, that's a little easier.
Nairobi.
Right, so if you wanted to know where it was, so we go here. The birthplace of President Obama, I understand.
Oh, yes, supposedly.
Okay, next question. So when the answer's right, we skin one of the toggle buttons as correct, and you'll see what happens when we do one wrong. So this one, I believe, is Boss Terry, but I'm going to choose something else so that you see a wrong answer. So here we skin it a little bit differently, and then once again, we can go see the real answer. All right, we're almost done.
It's not easy. That's why we call it capital punishment.
I've been doing this for a little bit. Okay, one more. Marshall Islands. That would be, Okay, so when you're done, you see another control, which is a side pop-up as well, and this one comes down from the bottom. We got 2 out of 5, and our average response time was 7.4 seconds. So we have a little room for improvement. Again, the view's opaque, and we can click that. And again, we can go see the most recent one. Okay, so I just wanted to show you, again, the structure is the same from what we saw before. And what I didn't show you were the compile time dependencies, and these are the charm plugins. These charm down plugins are specialized libraries that allow you to access the more native parts of the different phones, and they're divided into separate libraries. So if you don't use a certain function, then you don't need to include that part of them. And then here you see at the bottom, you see the maps, and this is an open source project provided by Gluon. And if you download and build it, you can then just include the maps jar file in your build and be able to access maps. Okay.
Okay.
I think.
Great. All right, and keep in mind that the layout of capital punishment was done with Scene Builder, and we had FXML for the separating the view from the model and controller, and we'll be going in to the code in a few minutes to demonstrate some of the JavaFX techniques and things that we're using. Okay, so next on the agenda is to talk a little bit more about FXML and the Gluon Charm library. Okay, now you saw in the code that mobile application was the main class for this Gluon, for any Gluon-based mobile app, and this is where you define each one of the views as factories that are called on demand by the user. And there's also layers that are created that can also be called on demand. Now, each view in a mobile application has a view class, and this invokes the FXML loader to parse the FXML file that was generated by Scene Builder and also instantiate the UI objects. And this FXML file also specifies the associated controller class, which is a Java code, and Gluon calls this a presenter class. And this class, you can specify event handlers, you can customize any controls that are needed, you can build custom layers, specify any bindings that you have, and perform your business application logic. Now, the FXML files, the CSS files, and any images that you might have in your mobile app all go in the resources folder. And you can use, again, Scene Builder is really nice to do your drag and drop to lay out your UIs. So in capital punishment, what you saw is we had a quiz view, we had a quiz presenter, we had FXML for the quiz, and we had CSS for the styling that you saw on some of the buttons. All right, here's a diagram that shows you a little bit more of a mobile view using FXML and the relationship between these classes. And what you see on the left is the view class. This is a Java class that invokes the FXML loader. And then the FXML loader parses the FXML file and builds the scene graph for you, that you can use in JavaFX. The FXML loader will create an instance of the Java controller class. Again, in Gluon, it's called a presenter class. And then this invokes the controller's initialize method, as you see here in the diagram. Now, the mobile application can switch to any of the views that are created by just specifying a unique string name. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Gluon Charm library right now, since you have access to the controls in JavaFX, but you also have these specific charm controls that are provided by Gluon. And again, the reason why you'd want to use these things is because they're skinned and they're set up particularly for mobile environments.
And I want to just jump in there. Also, Gluon has provided CSS style sheets that specifically skin the standard JavaFX controls for a more mobile-friendly environment too.
Right. Now, you'll see a lot of these charm controls in the demos and the code that's coming up, but let's talk a little bit about them and give you an overview of them right now. Okay, first you see the view, and this is the main visual component in your mobile app. You can have one or many views, and Gluon provides different ways of being able to navigate between the views. Now, in the capital punishment demo that we just showed you, you saw the map floating action button. That's in the charm library, and this switches the views back and forth between the quiz and the map. And then there was so you could have the map floating action button that went from the quiz to the map, and then you had the home button that went in the other direction from the map back to the quiz view. You notice there was an app bar at the top, a horizontal bar that sits on top of the view. And when you switch views, you typically create a listener that configures the app bar for the particular views that you want. And this can be a title and graphics and artifacts and things like that. You can have, for example, buttons and even graphics if you want. Now, in the Capital Punish app, you saw these things coming in from the right, the bottom, the top, or the left. And these are called side pop-up views. This is a layer that slides in on top of the current view from any of the four sides that I just mentioned. And these side pop-up views will stay in place until the user dismisses them. And notice, as Gail showed you, that the main view becomes opaque while the side pop-up view is visible for the user. Remember that the Gluon charm controls are following the material design guidelines, and you've already seen examples of the home and the map, but coming up a little bit later in some of the other demos, you'll see a plus that can be used for an ad. You can see a timeline that you could use for a graph, and also a view week, which you could use for things like bar charts and things like that. You can also have avatars, an image that is small and circular and convenient to use on your mobile app. And then, of course, this charm list view that I mentioned. It's a very, very nice component for displaying lists specifically in a mobile footprint. It's extremely configurable with floating headers, and you also have cells that you can program as well with event handlers. And we'll be seeing that coming up in something very soon. We talked about the floating action button. This is a button that sits on top of the view, and this is useful for actions like adding an element to a list or switching to another view. In capital punishment, you saw a progress indicator, and this is Gluon's version of a JavaFX control. And then Gluon also provides alert controls and date pickers and time pickers and things like that. Okay, we're going to go back to Gail now, and she's going to show you some of the charm controls that we used in capital punishment.
All right. So we are going to look at, in the view source, we're going to look at the controller class that has to do with the quiz view. And the quiz view is the main view that you saw that ran the quiz. So we're going to look at that, and we're going to bring up our app and move it over. So the first thing, lines 56 and 57. This is the view. So we showed you that in the FXML, and because it's in the FXML, we have the app sign FXML annotation to refer to it, so then we can refer to it in our program. And we configure the app bar, as Paul indicated, by configuring a listener that's attached to the view, and the showing property, which will become true when the view is displayed. So when a new view is displayed, this showing property is true, and here we simply set the title of the app bar to quiz. And again, it's really configurable about what you can do. You can add menu buttons there, or other decorations, it just depends on what your application does. Now let's look at the floating action button, and that we define it here between lines 92 and 97, and note that there's a Lambda event handler in there, and the floating action button has a map icon, material design icon, and we switch views to the secondary view, which is the map view. And you haven't told them about the material design.
No.
The material design is a guideline. It's a document done by Google, and it just is best practices for a mobile environment on creating apps that are both nice looking, intuitive, and user friendly. So Gluon has taken these principles from material design and used them to skin their controls, and also to provide a set of icons that you can use as appropriate in your application. All right. And then in we just talked about that, 94. And then let's look at the side pop-up views. So in this situation, we're creating a side pop-up view. So you create it as a layer, and there's a factory, and so that then you can invoke it whenever you need to, and you identify it with a string, and we call this one pop-up. And this is creating the one that gets displayed when the timeout happens. So here we're simply styling it, recreating it. We say that it should come up from the bottom. And then down in the event handler that gets called when time expires, it does a lot of things, but also one thing it does is it shows the pop-up layer that says time's up and time's expired. Okay, that's it.
Okay, we'll switch back to the slides. And the next thing we want to talk about now is leveraging JavaFX in your mobile apps. Okay, how many folks out there are using or have experience with JavaFX? Okay, we've anticipated that some folks might not have used that much JavaFX at this point, so we're going to talk a little bit about what the features of JavaFX are that make it so nice to develop mobile apps. And we'll start with properties. And in JavaFX, the concept of field update notifications is done with what's called properties. And this has always been an important concept with JavaFX and continues to be important with the Gluon Framework, because Gluon uses the JavaFX observable concept with its data synchronizations. And basically, observable means that you can attach a listener to a property and use a property in a binding expression. So basically, a JavaFX property wraps a field value and is observable. And registered listeners are notified when a property updates or becomes invalid. It also means you can use a property in a binding expression, and JavaFX makes property change notification easy to implement because JavaFX properties manage the registered listeners instead of you. Now, JavaFX supports several property implementations that you see here. Of course, read-write properties are readable and writable. A read-only property can actually change internally in JavaFX, but is not writable by an application itself. And of course, immutable properties never change. Okay, so let's go back to the code now, and Gail's going to show you how we're using JavaFX properties in the capital punishment demo.
Okay, so we have another package called model, and we put some classes in there that we use to control the state of the application. And one of these is quiz, that takes care of certain housekeeping details. And this class, we define a couple of our own JavaFX properties that we can use from other classes. So two of them that I want to show you is called score here on line 26. It's an integer property, and that's how it's defined, initialized to 0, and questions asked, also an integer property, defined as 0. And then further down, we provide public methods that you can get these properties, and also what are called public getter methods, where you get the question, the property, and you're able to use it in your application in binding expressions, which we'll show you in a little bit, and also you can add listeners to them. So JavaFX properties are very powerful because, as opposed to regular Java Bean properties, you can attach listeners and use them in binding expressions without having to provide the scaffolding code yourself. All right, and let's go ahead and go back to Quiz Presenter. Remember, this is the controller class for the quiz view, and we also have a property defined in here. Lines 43 and 44, and this is a double property. and it's initialized to, this is how we do the timer. So this property will be hooked into an animation that counts down from 10 to 0. And we'll show you how we use that property later. So this is just how we've defined the properties, and we'll show them how they're used. Okay.
Okay, so back to the slides. So now let's talk a little bit about JavaFX Listeners, because property changes can invoke a listener that has been registered for that property. When you do this and you set up a listener for changes to a property, the change can either be what's called an invalid value or an updated value. And listeners must be added to a property to listen for changes. Listeners can be removed from a property, and there are two types of listeners that you can implement in JavaFX with a property. The first one is an invalidation listener, and that listener is notified when values of an observed property become invalid. And what this means is that a property value may have changed due to lazy evaluation. And the distinction is important because with lazily evaluated values, it's not always possible to know if an invalid value has really changed until it's been recomputed. A change listener, on the other hand, is notified when the value of an observed property updates. And the cool thing about change listeners is they give you access to the old value and the new value, so you can use that information to see how some of your properties have changed and what your business logic needs to do about that. Generating change events requires eager evaluation, whereas invalidation events can be generated for both eager and lazy implementations. And remember, in situations where you need to know the old value and the new value, you'll probably want to use a change listener. All right, let's show you some code snippets now of these two types of listeners before we show you how we're using them in capital punishment. So go to the next slide.
Yeah,
sorry. There we go. Okay, here's a sample code for an invalidation listener. Notice we're using lambda expressions in both of these, and both of these are adding a listener to something called a status property of a my object. Now, in the invalidation listener, the lambda actually creates an observable type. And the code inside the lambda expression is going to execute whenever the status property of the my object becomes invalid. Below that is an example of a change listener where a lambda block will execute when the status property of the my object also changes. But notice in this code that you have access to both the old value and the new value when that update occurs. Okay, so let's go back to the code in capital punishment, and Gail's going to show you now a couple of examples of how we set up listeners in this program.
Okay, so what we're going to do is, just to make it easier to talk about, we're going to go ahead and run it again. And we'll, let's
kill the output window.
Kill the output window. Bring this back. Start the quiz. Oh, I think I know that one. Okay, so the first thing is we're going to show you how we use a listener. How we use the listener in the showing property line, and we showed that to you before, but now that you know about properties and listeners, so every view has a showing property, and again, if it's true, then this view is becoming newly shown, and we set the title. We also have a listener for the toggle group. So the selection toggle group are these sets of buttons. They're toggle buttons, and they're all part of the same group, which allows you to only select one at a time. And we attach a listener to the selected toggle property because when it changes, we want to know. And then the rest of this method is just figuring out if the answer was correct or not and what to do about it. And then finally, sorry. So remember, we show you the questions asked property that was defined in our quiz class. So we've added a listener to that property because we want to know when the quiz is over. And when the quiz is over, we need to do some housekeeping tasks. And one of them is to build that side pop-up view that comes down from the top that says what we answered right and what we what we didn't, and do housekeeping and starting over a new quiz. Okay.
All right. Okay, back to the slides. And the next thing we want to talk about is JavaFX Binding. Very powerful technique to use in UI and animation type contexts on your mobile applications. Now, binding calculates a value that depends on what's called one or more sources, and the sources are actually the dependencies of the binding. So what a binding does is it observes its dependencies for any changes that happen and then updates the value automatically for you. Specifically, a binding is an observable value with a list of dependencies that are also observable. And bindings let properties participate in dependencies with other property values as well. Now, the reason why binding is so powerful in JavaFX is because it keeps you from writing listeners, and some of the listeners that we just showed you. Binding is there a very concise way of setting up dependencies and updating values, and it can keep your application really consistent too. Now, we'll discuss JavaFX controls with GUI designs. We'll see that binding will help you keep your UI controls in sync with your model data. All right, now there are 4 binding strategies available to you in JavaFX, and we've listed them for you here. And all of these work with target properties and dependent observable values. The one that you'll use the most is the bind. That's the unidirectional binding, and this updates a target property whenever a dependent property changes. The target property cannot be updated by your program explicitly. Bidirectional binding goes in both directions. So a target property can update when a dependent property changes and vice versa. And both the target and dependent properties can be updated by your program if that's necessary. Now, the cool thing about binding is that JavaFX gives you these wonderful libraries that have a lot of predefined binding expressions that are done for you. And this is there's 2 libraries that you can use: the Fluent API and the static factory methods in the bindings class. And this lets you do a lot of things that you have to do in these kinds of applications. For example, conversions, calculations, Boolean conditions, and formatting requirements. And these are all predefined binding expressions that are really easy to use and let you develop your code much faster. Now, in the event that you have to do something on your own, it's a specific type of binding, and there's nothing in the Fluent API or the bindings class that does that, you can do your own. It's called custom binding, and usually you would do that when you have to. And this form of binding not only gives you more flexibility, but it also can give you some better performance too. Okay, so let's go back into capital punishment one more time, and Gail's going to show you some areas in the code where we use these binding techniques.
All right, we're bringing up the application again. All right, so on line 158, so we find that. We have we use this progress indicator, which again is the blue circular control on the screen, and it has a progress property. And in order to control how the blue circle increases or decreases, we're binding it to the time seconds property that I showed you before. And this time seconds property is controlled independently by an animation that simply counts down from 10 to 0. So here is one of the Fluent API methods that Paul talked about, timeseconds.divide, and we bind the property to time seconds. So when the animation starts, the progress indicator then is changes according to the animation. When I select, the animation stops. And similarly, the number that gets decremented, as you see here, that's also controlled by binding, 151. And so that's the timer label. That's just the label that we put inside the progress indicator. And that uses another library binding expression. And this takes the time seconds property, which is a double, and it formats it, and that's why we get a nice number that just has 1 digit to the right of the decimal point, and that's displayed. And the only thing we have to do is create the binding expression. And so as the timer goes down and as the time seconds finishes, that label gets updated for us. So it makes doing the UI very consistent and very easy. And finally, as I pointed out before, that when you click the Get Next Question button, it becomes disabled, and as well as this map button here. And let's see how we do that. And that's also done with binding. So the Next Question button, that would be this one. It has a disable property. If it's true, then it's disabled. And so we say if the timeline, which is our animation that runs the timer, it has a status property. If it's running, then we want to disable the question. So here again is library methods that we can use to create. We don't have to write a listener. We can actually just create a binding expressions that are what we want to happen. And again, the floating action button has a disable property, and that's this one down here, and it has the same binding expression. So alternatively, we could have bound the next question disable property to the floating action button to the next question, and that would work exactly the same.
Yeah, and I'd like to point out, before we go back to the slides, that I think this is one of the really great parts of JavaFX is the conciseness of these binding expressions. I mean, really, it's 2 lines of code, right, for both of these. The next question button and the floating action button are both disabled when the status property of the timeline of animation is running. It's very clear when you read the code. It's 2 lines of code. It keeps you from having to write listeners and having callbacks. It's very, very nice, and that's one of the main reasons why doing these UIs for mobile apps is so nice in JavaFX. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do, we'll go back to the slides here when Gail closes up the project, and we're ready to show you another demo. And this one's even going to be more involved than what we've shown you. This one is called BP Monitor, and it lets you add blood pressure readings. So someone could take needs to monitor their blood pressure readings, could take this app and enter their blood pressure readings every day and have it in a mobile way. The blood pressure readings in this program are stored locally on the device, and this application is going to show you some more interesting features of the Gluon Mobile framework that we're using. Now we're going to run this on the desktop, and you'll see that we'll have some readings here, and again they're going to be stored on the local machine. So we're going to go back to NetBeans now, and we're going to bring up this demo for you.
Okay, let's get rid of this. Okay, so this application is called BP Monitor, and I'm just going to run it. And we'll move this over and get rid of the output window and bring up the application. Okay.
So the first thing you see here is what's called the home view, and these are blood pressure readings from a list of previously entered ones that we've done. At the top is an app bar that contains or includes an avatar, that's the circular image, along with a title, and then 3 material design icon buttons, a home on the left, a timeline in the middle for a graph, and then a week view, which we show you as a bar chart. The home icon is disabled, and the other 2 icons switch views. So let's go ahead and show you that. We have some JavaFX line charts showing up here in this demo, and so Gail can move along through different weeks and different days.
And this is a standard JavaFX line chart. So this is part of the JavaFX runtime package.
And then if she clicks on the right one at the top on the bar, you'll see a bar chart. And I'll talk a little bit more about what these charts are actually showing you in a bit. Okay, so let's go back to the home view. And the view that you're actually seeing here is being done with the charm list control. Well, the headers are sorted and grouped together according to month and year, and each cell in the list view has the day of the month in a large circle, the readings in a text field, and 2 icons on the right for editing and deleting. In fact, we'll show you that now.
What I'm going to do is I'm going to add a reading, And so this is, again, the floating action button is meant for singular type actions, and when you have a list, adding a new reading is an appropriate usage for the floating action button. So we see a screen come in, and it gives the current date and time. My computer's set to Pacific Coast time, so it thinks it's 1:30 in the morning. And I'm going to go ahead and add a pretty normal blood pressure data. So it's systolic, diastolic, and pulse. And we click on Add New Reading. And what happens here is that the new reading appears as the most recent. The data is sorted in as most recent first. And you see that the headers group the readings, so everything in the same month and year is grouped together, and the day of the month is large, so it's easy to see, and the readings itself are displayed in the cell. And this is actually all one cell, but they're, as we'll show you, they're highly configurable. And one of the things that we can do is either edit or remove, so we're just going to go ahead and edit this, and we're going to say, oh no, it wasn't 120, it was 131, and we're going to update. And you see the color changes as to the reading for the systolic. So that's edit, and then delete. Again, this is an alert, and this is a Gluon control that it has been customized again for the mobile environment, and it just says, hey, do you really want to delete it? So we'll say yes, we do, and then it goes away.
Okay, so you saw the examples of using these delete and edit things, and the readings view, by the way, are bounce-in effects that are very nice with the Gluon charm controls. You saw bounce-in effects coming in from left to right and also from right to left. And the graph view reconfigures the app bar with a different title, and the menu icons are disabled for the chart. So once again, you know, if Gail brings up the chart right now, that would be the line chart in the middle. What you're seeing here is a standard JavaFX line chart, and we're using colors, red for the systolic data of a blood pressure reading, yellow for the diastolic data, and green for the pulse data. The y-axis is holding the values of the blood pressure reading, and the x-axis is displaying the date and time of the reading. The data is displayed so that the most recent is displayed first, and only 10 of these are displayed, but you can use a touch event or buttons to page through them, and we already showed you that. Now let's go to the bar chart, and what you're seeing here are the maximum, average, and minimum values of each one of the series that we are displaying in the line chart. Once again, what you're looking at here with the line chart and the bar chart are standard JavaFX components, and they work just great on the mobile environment using the Gluon Framework and the charm libraries.
Okay, so I think I'm showing them some color.
You're going to show them a couple of the controls now.
Yeah, I want to show you a couple of controls. Also, we were here last year, and we presented a desktop application that was similar to this blood pressure reading. But it was a desktop application, and each of those views that you saw was a separate detachable window, and you could make changes, and the charts all changed at the same time. But when we decided to do a mobile implementation of this view, we realized that you can't just take a desktop application with a bunch of windows and put it on a mobile phone and expect to get a good app. But what you have to do is figure out what each of your views will hold and how you're going to navigate among the views. And so that was one of the, I don't know if any of you out there are going from a desktop world to a mobile world, but that's one thing that you have to keep in mind is it's not just a direct translation. So what I wanted to show you is the readings view, which the first one you saw with all the list has a controller class called Readings Presenter. And let's bring this up, move it over. So in line 47, well, again, the FXML annotates the view, but we also did this in Scene Builder, and we added a charm list view to the view, and so that's why it has the FXML annotation. And the charm list view is this control that displays the data with the floating headers. And what I didn't show you is how the headers float and disappear as you go down, and that's really nice for the mobile environment. And it's important to have controls that work that way so you can get the most amount of real estate in this small footprint. The charm list view it has two types. The BP data here is our main object type that gets displayed, main class type, and then the double. And the double helps us simply configure the headers so that they're only the month and the year, and that's how we categorize the readings so that they're under the appropriate header. And let's see a little bit how you configure it. And typically, when you use the charm list view, you have separate classes for the cells and for the headers, and we've done that. And we're not going to show you that part of it, but we just want to show you a little bit about how it's configured. So this method reference in the header function is one that helps us sort and categorize readings. So when they have the same month and year, they go under the same header. We have a comparator to do the sorting, and we have a cell factory. And again, the cell factory has two method references, and these provide the logic that allows us to do the edit and to do the remove. And so they're associated then with the visuals in the cell, but the methods themselves are actually in our controller class. And we also want to show you the alert. And the alert, you saw the alert come up when we deleted the reading. And again, the alert is a Gluon control. And it just allows you to configure. There's a lot of options in which you configure, and we're using one for confirm, but there's other types as well. Okay, that's it.
Okay, great. All right, so back to the slides and our agenda. We'll have one more topic here before we take a break. And we want to talk about Gluon Connect and Gluon Cloud Link, which allow you to connect your mobile device to the cloud. And we'll have one little more demo to show you here too before the break. Okay, so let's take a look. Go to the next slide. We'll take a look at the Gluon Cloud diagram here. This shows you some of the Gluon Cloud capabilities that you have available to you. The idea is that you have multiple devices that can access data and update the data, and you want to have all of your devices synchronized when any one device changes or updates the data. Now, you can store your data in a database or in the cloud. And Gluon lets you store the data in their cloud environment, but you can use other third-party services if you want to. So now, let's show you how easy it is to configure a client for efficient data synchronization with both objects and lists. And we'll also show you how remote binding can keep a UI in sync with your application data across all of the devices. Okay, so hang on one second here. Got something that's weird here. Just 1 second. Okay, so Gluon's client Connect library lets you map data with observable properties and lists. And just have you seen how important JavaFX properties are for configuring and synchronizing your application data? The same principles can be used with observable properties and leveraged across with remote data. So Gluon provides links to many common data sources, such as the cloud, ordinary files, and even REST. Okay, so before the break here, Gail's going to show you our little Gluon Connect demo. And, we have some devices that are set up on the web here, so we'll see what happens.
Well, we've only shown you these mobile applications running on the desktop, but we actually do have all these applications running on phones. It's a little more difficult, but this is one where we can And we will connect our phone later on so you can actually see the phone up on the screen. But for right now, we'll show you a simple demo that broadcasts a message. By broadcast, I mean it stores it in the cloud, and all connected devices can read the message, and it will be synchronized. So if the message changes, all the devices will update. And this is a technique that we call remote binding, or Gluon calls remote binding. So let's close this and close this. And this is called message. And we'll go ahead and run this. And I ran it earlier and broadcast a message from my phone. And so let me close the output window so it's easier to see. Okay, so we're going to put a message in now, and then you see it gets updated. Now I'm going to run this on both these phones now. And we're doing this over Wi-Fi. So from my iPhone, I'm going to put in a message that says hello from my iPhone and say submit. And I know you can't see my phone, but that appears now up on the screen on the desktop app because it's connected to the same one. And this is a Nexus 5. It won't explode.
Yeah, don't worry.
And again, I'm going to bring it up right now. And I'll type something in from my Android. And I might spell something wrong, I don't know. And hit submit. And then it says hello from the Android.
And it also updated,
on
the iPhone.
On
too.
the iPhone, it also said hello from the Android on the iPhone and on the desktop as well. So they're all connected to this, using the same application, so to the same data set on the cloud. But how it's done is pretty cool, right?
Yeah, right.
So.
Okay, so we are ready to take a break. Let's see, it's 11:45 right now. So how about you guys can walk around, stretch your legs for about half hour. We'll see you back here at 11:15. And what we'll do is we'll show you how we just did this. You know, we'll bring up the code and we'll show you how we made all these connected devices respond to each other. So we'll see you back here in a half hour. Okay, so this is where we left off when we took the break, and we showed you our little Gluon Connect demo, and we showed you that we could send these messages from any of the two devices that we had connected, as well as on the desktop, and they all stayed in sync. So what we'd like to do now is show you how we did this. Okay, so now if you want to store data in the cloud, you need to register with Gluon, and you can do this for free. And you register your application. And then what Gluon does is it gives you both an application key and a secret key, which you can use to create what's called a Gluon client for that particular application. The default is cloud storage, but for local storage, you can specify a mode called operation mode.local only, as we're showing here on the slide. And you don't need to register with Gluon for local storage, by the way. For example, our BP Monitor program that we showed you did not store any data in the cloud. It was all on the device. But we have another version of that demo coming up where we will store the blood pressure readings in the cloud. So you don't need to register for any local storage that you have. But the BP Monitor used the local storage, but the message app that we showed you before the break is using cloud storage. Okay, now let's, before we get into remote binding, let's kind of review how you do local binding in JavaFX with a simple example here. And then we'll show you how easy it is that the Gluon has made it with remote binding. Okay, suppose we have a message class, and you've already seen how we can use binding with the bind API to bind the text property of a message object to the text property of a label in your UI. And what this means is that when the message object changes, the label in your UI will update automatically. And that's because the message text property is observable, and binding is implemented behind the scenes with a listener that's actually attached to your property. And what's cool, and like we said before the break, is that you don't have to write the code for the listener and the callback and everything else. You just specify the binding expression that you see here. Now, it turns out that we can do the same thing with the Gluon observables when we want to do things like remote binding and being able to update the devices, as you saw. Okay, now to do this, you're going to have to use Gluon's data synchronization options, and we're going to talk about those right now. And they've made it very simple to use, by the way. So what you can do is use these data synchronization options when you access a Gluon observable object through a Gluon client. And these options can apply to observable lists and observable objects as well. Okay, so there is list write through and object write through. When you specify either one of those, what happens is the remote copy updates when the local data changes. And when you specify either the list read through or the object read through options, then the local copy updates when the remote data changes.
And I just wanted to add that in the demo that you showed, the broadcast message demo, we weren't dealing with lists of data. We were only dealing with a single object. So we used object write through and object read through because we needed both the devices to update when the cloud changed and the cloud to update when one of the devices changed the data locally.
Right, and if you're using local-only storage, then the read-through options don't apply, so they're actually ignored. Now, in the message demo that we showed you before the break, we specified both object write-through and object read-through. And that meant that when Gail submitted her new message on the iPhone, the write-through option was applied and then the remote copy updated. And this is because we specified read-through, so the local copy on the desktop also updated. Now, the same concept that we just talked about applies to lists as well. Although with lists, you have the situation where updates can apply when you add or remove to the list, as well as updating an object that is inside the list. And we'll have more to say about that in a little bit. Okay, now let's show you how to do remote object binding. The statement that you see here initializes the Gluon observable object that wraps a message object. And this is the message object that we showed you in the demo. And what we did is we used the previously created Gluon client a couple of slides ago to create an object data reader, and we specified the synchronization flags that you see here. And that would be object read through and object write through. We then do a bind API to bind the message's text property to the UI label text property. Now, the cool part about all this is Gluon is doing all of the remote data reads and writes asynchronously for you behind the scenes. So all you have to do is attach a listener to the state property of a Gluon observable to make sure that the remote objects are properly initialized or that the data access is complete. And what we'll do now is we'll go, Gail's going to go into the message app that we demoed for you, and she'll show you how this remote object binding works.
Okay, so before I switch over to NetBeans, you'll notice the ... in the middle of the slide here, and that's because you have to make sure that that the connection that you're requesting with the retrieve object has succeeded. And so you need to write some code to, because it's done asynchronously, you need to write some code to say, hey, when it's done, then I can go and I can access the data. But once the connection succeeds, this bind that you see at the bottom, it's the same as what we've showed you before, and that allows your application to update seamlessly. So let's go show you this code. Okay, so this is we're in the message application, and I have the primary presenter, which is the controller class for this view, open. And here in line 24 is the Gluon client, and in line 23 is the Gluon message. And this Gluon message then is a Gluon observable object. So it's similar to a JavaFX observable object, but it has other housekeeping details within it, and it allows you to know if you're connected and things like that. And the Gluon client is what you used to set up the data readers. And then down here in line 38, we have simply a UI component, a message, current message called, that is a label. So let's look at some of this code. Okay, so we're going to go to 52. All right, so we get the Gluon client, and we set up this retrieve object as the same code that you saw before. And so you're telling the data reader that the type of data you're reading, which is message.class, this is a string that identifies the data, and again, it's object read through and object write through. So the Gluon observable, one of the things that it includes is state property. So we can add a listener to it and say, hey, we want to know when the connection has succeeded, and then we can do different checks to see if this check here is to see, we have to do the very first time in case there isn't any data stored there yet. And then we create a data object writer, so we can actually write data to it. But if there's stuff there, then we can simply get it out, and then line 78 down here, we look at the label property and we bind it to the Gluon observable text property. So the .get gives us a message, and the message has a text property. So you see here that we're just doing a simple bind, but it's a remote object, which is a Gluon observable. Okay, and then, yeah, that's it.
Okay. All right, back to the slides. And now let's talk about local lists. Okay, now recall that JavaFX has the concept of observable collections, which lets you listen for changes to things like lists. For example, like I said, where an object is added to a list or deleted from a list, or possibly changes to properties of objects that are contained in the list. Now, by default, if you attach a listener to an observable collection in JavaFX, the listener will be invoked whenever an item is added to or removed from the list. So if you have a regular JavaFX list control and use the setItems method to populate the control will automatically update when an item is either added to the list or removed from the list. However, if you want to modify an item that's inside the list view control doesn't actually update unless you define what's called property extractors for the list or write code in the list cell view control. So it's a good idea to keep these behaviors in mind for observable collections, particularly when you're dealing with persisting data remotely. All right, now here's a diagram that shows you the difference between what you can do in JavaFX with JavaFX collections and a UI control on the left, and then underneath what Gluon has done to take this concept to remote possibilities. So on the top figure, we're connecting just a regular JavaFX list control to an observable list. And in the bottom figure, we use a Gluon observable list to maintain the data synchronization. And the cool part, like we said, and like Gail said, is that just like a regular JavaFX observable list, you can make call binding in the API for the UI control, and Gluon will do all of the data synchronizations for you. And so we're going to show you how that remote binding is done right now. Okay, suppose you have a list of messages. And first, you would associate a Gluon observable list with what's called a data provider. And by default, this retrieve list provider would use list write through and list read through, because we're talking about lists now. In this case, changes to the Gluon observable list would update the UI control and the remote data for you. And just like reading and writing single objects, any listeners that you have attached to the Gluon observable list will automatically notify you when asynchronous data reads and writes are complete. Now, let's talk about what happens if you want to try and update any objects that are in the list. Okay, just like JavaFX observable collections, Gluon observable lists have two levels of synchronization that we're showing here on the slide. The first level is a list update when list elements are either added to the list or removed. The second level is where a list element updates when an item in the list changes. Now, to get synchronization when the list changes, you want to use the list write through and the list read through synchronization flags, which I mentioned previously. To get synchronization when an individual object in the list changes, then you want to use the ones you see here on the second level, object write through and object read through. Let's show you an example now. Here's some code from the BP Monitor application. And remember that this application didn't perform any cloud updates because it wrote the blood pressure readings to the device's local storage. But in terms of JavaFX, this is still considered remote, even though you don't need a web connection. And because we didn't have any devices that were accessing this data, there wasn't any need to specify the object read-through or the list read-through options. And remember that when read-through means that when the data changes remotely, the local copy will update. Now here, in this code example, we're specifying the flags list write-through and object write-through. And this means that when the Gluon observable list changes or an individual item inside of the list changes, then the remote data will automatically update. And the statement below is attaching a listener to the state property of the Gluon observable list. So once the connection status succeeds, we can then associate the Gluon observable list, which is actually a subtype of observable list, with the UI control, and that, as you see here, is BP list, which is a list property. Okay, so we're going to go back into the BP Monitor code, and Gail's going to show you a little bit more about these list synchronization flags.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run this. Now again, this is the BP Monitor. It's not doing cloud access, but it stores its data locally on the machine. And in terms of, as Paul indicated, in terms of the Gluon Connect structure, we're still going through the Gluon client and to look at the local machine and or local device. So let's open this. All right, so we have a service class. And the service class performs the Gluon Connect and service tasks for us. So the first thing we'd like to look at is line 31. And this is a list property that we define in the service class. And as you see, we'll make it publicly accessible, but we're using that in the service class. And then in lines 43, okay, so in line 43 to 47, this is how we're setting up the Gluon observable list. That is a BP data, and we're creating a data provider to read the list, and we're using the Gluon client. And as you can see, we tell it's BP data class, and we're using list write through and object write through. And again, the list write through is for add and removes to the list, and the object write through is when an individual item changes. So we have to add a listener to the state property of the Gluon observable list to know that it's okay to access the data. And when the connection has succeeded, then we will bind the local list property to the Gluon observable list. And as Paul indicated, the Gluon observable list is a type of observable list. So in JavaFX, we can simply do the set, and then this BP list property will be updated with the Gluon observable data. And then down below here, we make in 65 through 67, we make this list property available as a public method. And that allows our view class, controller class, to access the service module and get the list and not be worried about the details of how the Gluon client works and issues like that. Okay, so I want to show you that real quick in Readings Presenter.
Right.
So in our views, the Readings views is the screen that you saw. The Readings Presenter class is the controller class for that view. It's nice to have that as a reference. And we're going to talk about the @inject annotation later, but in line 41 and 42, this does dependency injection and makes our service object available as a singleton, and it's a convenient way to share data here. And this charm list view is the control that we showed you before that does the nice formatting of the data. So in 83 to 86. Then we add a listener to the list property from the service class, and when it changes, we update the charm list view by doing a set items and a get. Okay, that's it.
Okay. All right, great. We'll go back to the slides, and we're now ready to show you another demo. And this one's very similar to what we did with the BP monitor. This one is called BP Cloud. Again, BP stands for blood pressure readings. Only instead of storing the blood pressure readings locally on the device, we're now going to store them in the cloud. So the way that it's similar to the BP monitor app that we showed you before, except that these blood pressure readings that you saw are going to be stored in the cloud. But before you can access or create any data with this application, you have to be what's called an authenticated user on the device that you're using. And obviously that makes sense because you'd want to have somebody to be authenticated on the device when they're accessing the data in the cloud. And so what we're going to do now is we're going to show you how to be an authenticated user, and Gail's going to do that right now for you and show you how that works.
Okay, I'm going to quit this program. Okay, so the application is BP Cloud, and as Paul indicated, the readings will be stored in the cloud, and it's different. This is different from the message program that you saw. The message program it was public access. It had no security involved in it. Anybody who ran the program could access the data. But in BP Cloud, we want the data associated with a particular person, so we have to have a way to authenticate the user so that one person's data isn't mingled or confused with another person's. And Gluon offers 3 ways to authenticate a user using different platforms: Twitter, Google+, or Facebook. And in this case, we wanted to make sure one user is the same user, so we just picked one and we're using Twitter. So I removed my authentication credentials from this machine so you could see what happens when an application runs and the user is not authenticated yet but needs to be authenticated. So it's going to take us to the Twitter website, and I'm going to have to put in my credentials. And it should all work.
hopefully. Yep, they did.
Okay, so let me just get rid of the output window right now. All right, so this screen comes up because we have registered our application with the Gluon Cloud link, and we have configured login methods for Twitter. And when we do that, Gluon formulates this screen that appears. And if we had also formulated for Google Plus and Facebook, similar icons would appear on this screen and you would choose. But as I said, we just did Twitter. So I'm going to click on this, and it's going to take us to the web, and it's going to take us to Twitter. And so I am going to put in my Twitter handle. And my password.
And click the box.
And I'm saying I'm authorizing this app, BP Cloud from ASGteach.com, to use my Twitter login data. Okay, so now I'm authenticated. Now you see a list of readings. And this is a different list of readings than you saw before, but these are associated with me. There's my name up there. So the application is able to get this information from the authenticated user information that Gluon provides. Okay, so.
And
I was going to.
You can kill the app and bring it back up and show them that,
Yeah.
that they don't have to
Okay, so I'm
authenticate.
going to. Now, once you're authenticated, Gluon stores the data on the local device, whatever it is, so you don't have to re-authenticate each time. So just to show you that when I rerun it, you see it comes up as an authenticated user. Okay.
And do you want, you could put in a new reading and...
Oh, I'm doing that now? Okay.
Yeah, and you can, and the charts all work, it's the same as what you saw before?
Yeah, it's the same as pretty much as the BP Monitor app that you saw before, but now the data is in the cloud. And, well, what I could do is run it on here and add I also have this authenticated on the iPhone. And so I'm going to add some data on my phone. And I know you can't see it, but you'll be able to see the results. Okay, that's pretty fast.
Yep,
there it is.
It was fast.
So, okay, so we see that it all talks to the cloud. And this, again, is authenticated for me. So if you were to run this app and authenticated you would see no data until you added some. Okay.
Okay, good. Okay, back to the slides. And the next topic on our agenda will be to show you how we do, or how you would do authenticating users in the cloud. Gail just demonstrated how it was done. Now we're going to show you how you actually do that in the code. Okay, so just a quick review of where we're at with these two demos. When you look at these two apps, you can see that the BP Monitor and the BP Cloud are very similar, but they do differ in a very significant way. The BP Monitor program that we showed you in the first part of this talk stored the blood pressure readings locally on the device, and there was no sharing with other devices. Therefore, there weren't any privacy issues involved on who could access the data. Now, the BP Cloud program that Gail just ran is reading and writing data to the cloud. And this data, as she showed you, has to be tied to a user who is authenticated. And then when this is done, a specific user can access his or her data from any authenticated device. So in the demo that we just showed you, once Gail became authenticated on her laptop, her previously stored data was also becoming available. And therefore, she can access the data from her phone, her laptop, or any other device that has been authenticated with the same user. And when she didn't edit a storage, she didn't edit a reading that was stored, but if she did, then any connected device that was authenticated would reflect the change that she made.
I did add.
And yeah, you did. That's right. and so we'll show you how to do this now. So next slide. Okay, now first you must register your application through the Gluon Cloud Link portal. And when you do that, you'll get application keys to create your Gluon client, which we showed you earlier. You can also specify the authentication mode .user, which requires an authenticated user before you can link a Gluon observable to your data provider. And by the way, the default authentication mode is public, which means that anyone can access the cloud data for the application. But you'll recall that on our previous Cloud Link demo, that would be the one that did the small little message. That one used the public authentication mode. Okay. All right, now here's a slide on the data provider in more details. Now we can use the previously created Gluon client to link a data provider with a Gluon observable. And here in this code, we're using a Gluon observable list to create a list data reader. Now take a close look at the arguments here. You'll note that the user's nickname and network ID are showing up here, and that helps us build a user-specific string to identify the cloud-based data set. And we'll show you in a little bit how we define and access this user data. Now, just like in the BP monitor program, you'll see that we have bpdata.class there, and that means that we're going to be able to read BP data objects in the cloud. Of course, the sync flags is the magic that makes this all work, right? We're using list read through, list write through, object read through, and object write through. And what this means is that changes to the local list of the blood pressure readings that you saw are written to the cloud, and changes to the cloud data are then updated in the local copies. So you should note that synchronization applies for both adds and deletes, as well as objects that update that are contained in the list. And when you have more than one device that's connected, again with the same authenticated user, the read-through options make sure that all the devices are updated. All right, now we're going to actually show you how we do the user authentication. Now this particular example authenticated the user before we defined the data provider that we showed you on the previous slide. And that's because the authenticated user's nickname and network ID is necessary to connect to the data in the cloud. Okay, so instead of using the implicit user authentication in the Gluon client's createList data reader method, we're going to invoke the Gluon client authenticate method explicitly. But there are some timing issues that you have to be aware of. Number one, the authentication process view is running on top of the current view. So if you invoke the authenticate method before the primary view of your application is displayed, then the primary view would appear on top of the authenticated view, and your user will be unable to authenticate themselves. So the solution to this problem is an event handler that initiates authentication after the primary view is shown. And one of the great things about the Gluon framework is that you have lifecycle events. So it's easy to hook into this lifecycle and put the event handler in the right place. So here, what you're looking at in the code is an event handler for what's called the shown lifecycle event. And here we're going to invoke the retrieve readings in the service class. And this retrieve readings method will start up the authentication process that Gail showed you. The method reference that you see down below, this : get data, is the authenticated method, and that's going to be invoked after the authentication has completed. So when you run the application on a device that's already been authenticated, then authenticate will immediately invoke get data and skip the authentication step. Okay?
Next slide.
Now let's show you how to access the authenticated user data. If you look at the post-construct method here on the slide, which is in the service class, you'll see that the Gluon client has an authenticated user property. This is just a normal, regular JavaFX object property, and this is set when authentication takes place. The best way to access this property is to create a local JavaFX property in the service class and then use a bind expression to bind it to the Gluon client authenticated user property. And a very convenient place to do this is in the service post construct method, which is going to be called automatically after the service object is instantiated. So the bind expression that you see here is making sure that our local user property will automatically contain the Gluon client's authenticated user data as soon as the authentication takes place. Note that we only show the JavaFX user property here, but the service class also defines a public property getter as well. Okay, back to Gail now, and she's going to show you how this authenticated user property is used in the BP Cloud application.
Okay, in the BP Cloud application, we do our cloud and service in the service package. The Gluon client provider gives you the Gluon client, and it's the service class that we're interested in here. So first of all, here's the property that we defined. It's an object property of type user, and this is a Gluon class up here. And that's what an authenticated user is of type Gluon Cloud user. And so we're going to create a simple object property here in the service class, and then we're going to make this user property available. Okay, and you've seen the Gluon client, and so that's 27, 45, 94. So here in the post construct method, we have the bind, and that's the bind that you saw on the slide. So while at this point the user may or may not be authenticated, the binding is a convenient way to say to make sure that as soon as the Gluon client is authenticated and this authenticated user property is correctly set, it will update our local property. And so we know that our local property will be valid as soon as the user is authenticated. And then the retrieve readings is what we showed you before, and we specifically call this authenticate. That initiates the web access to Twitter that you saw. If you're already authenticated, it goes directly to the getData method. And then the getData method creates the data provider using information from the authenticated user, the nickname and the network ID. And so we know that we're accessing a database that is tied to the authenticated user here. And once again, you've seen this before where we set the local list property to the Gluon data. And in line 98, and 94, we make these public methods so that other classes throughout the application can access the authenticated user information if they need it. And so we'll show you shortly how that's accessed. Okay, going back.
Okay, back to the slides. Okay, now the service class JavaFX user property will have information from the authenticated process. And this property can be accessed from any view that uses the service object. For example, in the readings presenter, you see this @inject statement, and this is dependency injection, and it's used to access the service object so that we can then call service.getUser.getName to set the view's application bar title, and that's when you saw Gail's name showing up in the app bar on the slide. So,
yeah,
did you want to show them that?
I'm going to show them that. And, well, let's run it real quick.
Right.
views. Sorry about that. So we're going to the controller class, the readings presenter.
Yeah,
and so again, this is in the listener that for the showing property for the view, which, as you recall, this listener will be invoked each time the view is newly shown on the phone. And at this point, we have, I want to show you that we have the inject for the service class. So we have a singleton object that we can use in this view and any view that cares to access the service class of service object. So we make sure that it's set and everything's fine. Actually, it should be. But here, we set the title. So we say service.getUser.getName, and that will get the full name of the authenticated user, and that's what appears then on the app bar. Okay. That's really short.
Okay, great. Okay, back to the slides. All right, but how do you actually get the authenticated views for the sites that you want to authenticate for? We demonstrated Twitter, but again, you can do all three of these or any of them that you want, Twitter, Facebook, or Google+. So for each platform that you want to authenticate users for your application, what you do is you have to create an application for that platform. And to do this, you go there and create the application on the target site. And then they will give you a platform-generated application key, a key and a secret key to the Gluon Cloud Link portal for your application. And you just copy those keys there so that Gluon can access those sites for the authentication. This is how Gluon Cloud Link knows to generate the login views for each platform that you configure. And the Gluon documentation is very detailed, has step-by-step instructions for each of the three platforms, and it's pretty straightforward to set up. Okay, so we'll go to the next topic on the agenda for today is to talk about the other framework that we're using, and this is a much smaller framework. This is the Afterburner framework that we're using for dependency injection, and we just saw an example of that a second ago, or a minute ago when you saw the @inject there. So we'd like to tell you a little bit more about using this framework and why it helps you with your mobile app development. Okay, now remember that when you create a Gluon mobile application with FXML, you have the option of using the Afterburner framework. And you may remember way back when we started, when Gail first built that application with the plugin, one of the options was, do you want to use the Afterburner framework? And what this is a lightweight framework that provides what's called dependency injection, which means that it'll generate boilerplate Java code and instantiate the objects for you based on configuration parameters and things like that. There's a general dependency injection that you can use through the @inject that you saw a few minutes ago. And the question is, why would you want to do this? Well, the main advantage is that when you use the Afterburner dependency injection, it lets you access shared model objects or services. And this reduces the need for creating application-wide variables and also singletons, a lot of boilerplate code that you have to write. Dependency injection makes it much easier to use and to have object sharing. So let's go back into the BP Cloud application now. Go back into NetBeans, and Gail's going to show you a little bit about how we're using the Afterburner framework.
Okay, the first thing I'm going to show you is that the view class, which if you don't use Afterburner, the view class, the job that it has is to invoke the FXML loader, read your FXML file, and have your view instantiated. And when you use Afterburner, those tasks are done for you by injected code. So you see that here in the readings view, actually the class is empty because it's all done through the injected code. That's not a huge deal. But the other thing is the general dependency injection is really nice. And You've seen this before. We have a model class that we want to access shared as a singleton, and a service class that we would like to access shared as a singleton. And with the @inject, we can do that. And that's the readings presenter class, which is the controller for the main view. But we have the same type of code in the edit presenter class, which is controller for when you either add a new reading to your application or you modify an existing reading. We do this through this controller class, and it also will access the model code for shared of a specific reading. A shared reading is stored in there, and then also the service. So it makes it easier for application-wide object sharing.
Okay. All right, so what we're going to do next, which will be the last topic on today's agenda, is we're going to show you some tips for how you can target your application to specific platforms. And what we'll do is we'll go through some techniques for both iOS and for Android. Okay, let's start with the iOS platform first. Gluon's framework is, of course, cross-platform, but you will encounter differences between the iOS and the Android. So what we're going to do is share some experiences from what we have done, and also show you some important places in the file system and some tools and things that you would need, and some techniques that go along with that. So the first thing that we'll do is we'll talk about where the icons and the splash screens, maybe any iTunes artwork that you have, or any specific iOS settings that you need to do. In these directories, source iOS, this is where you would go to configure some of those and put in these things that you need. So Gail's going to show you that right now when we go back into NetBeans.
Okay, we don't need this.
And remember, you have to switch to the files view to
Yeah.
look at this stuff. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to look at BP Cloud, the application that had the readings in the cloud. And we're going to the Files menu because the project view doesn't show all the details. And that's because the whole point of the project view is to show you really what you need on your day-to-day debugging. But there's times when you have to get in and look at particular files. And one of these is if you want to create splash screens and icons for an iOS app, and that would be under iOS assets directory. And you can see we have a bunch of default splash screens, and the splash screen, those are the screens that we displayed as holding points in our slideshow to show that we're going to go to the graphics. So, for example, let's just look at one. So that's going to come up on your phone while the application is initializing. And they have it for different sizes. And then the icon is what you see on the screen that you click to invoke the application. Let's look at this one. And you'll notice that for iPhone, the background is white. It works better that way. And you'll see on the Android, the background is transparent. So these are differences that you still have to deal with. The iTunes art, we haven't configured anything for these applications, but you would put it there. The last thing I want to show you is default info.plist, which is an XML configuration file. Now, Gluon generates this for you when you create your application, so normally you will not have to modify it. But for the BP Cloud, we actually did have to add, and I don't know if that will always be the case, but right now we had to add some network security attributes, and this information was on the Gluon website of what you had to add, so we just added it. So it's nice to know that this configuration file is here, and if you do something like change the main class name of your project, you'll have to go through and make some changes, things like that. Okay.
Okay, back to the slide. We just showed you then the first bullet there. Now we're going to talk a little bit about how you would actually install and execute on the connected device for iOS. And to do that in NetBeans, you just go to the tasks, and then you go to navigate to launch, and then there's a selection for launching the iOS device. And we're not going to actually do that on the iPhone here, but we'll show it to you anyway. And then we have some recommendations about some things that you can do when you do that.
Okay, so we're going to show, okay. Okay, let's go back to projects. So to install something on the iPhone, use task launch iOS device. Your device needs to be connected through a USB port, and it builds. This is the process we talked about at the very beginning, where it compiles it. It uses the AOT compiler, and it translates the bytecodes into native iOS code. It uploads the bundle to your phone, and it does all the provisioning. That's why you need a Mac and you need Xcode. And then it actually invokes the application, so it starts running on your machine. And as long as you leave it connected to your laptop, then any output will appear as if you were running it normally on the desktop. It will appear on the output screen in the IDE window. So if there's an exception that you need to look at, that will be there. Now, there's a couple things. One is that you should always debug it first on the desktop. Make sure your logic is good. Make sure the controls do what you want it to do, and that. But if you have an issue or a problem that appears on the iPhone but not on the desktop, then you're going to have to pay attention to the output file for that. And the other thing is, if you have applications like BP Cloud or BP Monitor that actually stores data on the local device. BP Cloud stores authentication data. BP Monitor stores actual readings. And you want to do a clean install, the best way is to simply remove the application from the phone and then reinstall it, and all the user application the user data will go away. So that's a good way to get a clean install. Okay, let's go back.
Okay, so when we go to the next slide, now we're going to give you some tips on the Android platform. It's the same kind of idea, but there are some platform-specific files that you need to be aware of. So once again, there are these directories, source Android, and there are some things in here that Gail's going to show you now that will be more Android-specific. And that would be preparing the device, using the developer options and USB debugging, selecting the proper configuration for USB there, and then installing and executing on the device itself. And I think you're actually going to do this, right?
Yeah, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, so she's going to do it.
We have to be a little patient, but I think it'll be fine, and I think it might be instructive to see it. So first, we're going to go and look at the associated files for an Android device, like we showed you. So we have to go to, here it is, source, Android, res, and then each of these directories include, so I'm going to get rid of this.
Yeah, the icons.
Oops, that's not what I wanted. Okay, so, yeah, this is what. Okay, so this is the icon for the Android, and you can see that the background is transparent, and these different directories hold icons of different sizes meant for different device types. And the Android manifest.xml, again, is an XML configuration file. You shouldn't have to mess with it, but it's always good to know where it is and the types of properties that it defines. Okay, now we're going to go back. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to connect my Android to the desktop using a USB port. And it wants to upload my photos.
They don't want to see your photos.
And so we're going to quit photo. All right. So So when you get a standard Android phone, by default, the developer options are turned off. So you have, and if you've done Android development, you probably know this, but I hadn't before, and so I was learning about this. So you have to turn on the developer options, and then you have to turn on USB debugging, and you have to make sure that there's different USB configurations. And I don't think all phones behave exactly the same. So the one that I had to choose to use this to download the application was called Picture Transfer Protocol, and there's another one that other devices might use. So we're going to go ahead and install the BP Cloud. And this time we use Android, and we use Android install. Now, what Android install does is it uses, the AOT compiler, and it creates a bundle, and it uploads and it uses the Android toolkit that you installed when you began your development task, and it creates a bundle, and it uploads it to the file. And then when the NetBeans come back and says build successful, that means the application is on the phone, but it doesn't invoke it. So you have to invoke it yourself on the phone, and then the output does not come in the output window of your IDE, but rather you have Android-specific tools that you can use to look at the output. So when it gets to zip-align debug, it's almost done. There. Okay, so it's done. Build successful. That means that it's now on the application. And I know that you can't see my phone, but I'm going to run it. So first, I'm going to change to a terminal window, and I'm going to invoke this command called ADB, which stands for Android Debug Bridge. Okay, and I'm not even running the application yet, so it's connected to my device, and it's giving me output. So I'm going to run BP Cloud, and you'll see that when I do that, a lot of stuff comes on. And it's up, and it's an authenticated user, so I have the stuff displayed. And in our application, we use mostly system.outs to do output. So as you see, there's a lot of output coming from other components of the system that aren't from our particular program, but are from the system as a whole. So, and I'm going to choose the line chart right now, and you see all the data comes out. We're adding this to the line chart, we're adding that to the line chart. But this can be, if you want to limit, there's ways to filter this using the standard grep command. So we're going to stop this, Control-C. And here, ADB logcat, so it's ADB logcat gives you the output. And if we filter for system.out, then that will limit it a little bit.
And this, if I jump in here a bit, this makes things a lot easier for debugging, right? Because when you can use grep like this to look for things, you can put in tags to monitor what's happening or what's not happening in the control flow of your program. You can also use Java logging too, right? So you can set different levels of logging with fine logging or coarse logging, and you can look for those things here as well. So there's a lot of stuff that comes out, and you probably want to filter it most of the time. But you can get as much as you want or as little as you want, and it's pretty easy to work with.
So I'm going to quit this now, and it still needs to be emphasized again. You don't want to do this for general debugging of your application. Do that on the desktop. It's much easier. You have much more control. But again, if you see an issue that maybe only appears on a specific device, then you can do this. And if it's an exception, then you can't do this filtering because you want to make sure you get all the information out.
Okay. Okay, so what we thought we would do before we get to the summary is we're going to be brave here, and we're going to actually disconnect from the projector here, and Gail's going to hook up the iPhone
We just want
into the projector,
to show you
and we're going to run the demos and show you that everything that you saw on the desktop today in NetBeans that we used for the development environment with the Gluon plugin and the Gluon Framework, we have it all running on the phone, and we'll just do the iPhone here. But Gail's
we don't have a
because we have
So Apple, I guess someone said, is in the dongle business. So you can get a dongle that goes from your iPhone to HDMI. So we're going to show you actually the phone itself. And we're just going to show a couple of the demos just so you can see what they look like in a mobile. So we're going to unplug HDMI. What's all this?
Caught up here. Okay. And then you can plug that in there.
And it takes a few minutes.
Actually, it came up.
There it is.
No, it's there.
Yeah. Okay. So these 4 apps at the bottom are 4 demo apps, and I'm going to show you Capital Punishment first. And just start the quiz. New Caledonia. Well, I happen to know what that is. And do a couple more.
The capital of Belgium.
Oh, my God. Show you the map.
And by the way, with the maps, Gail can interact with the map too. The Gluon Maps is really cool because you can zoom and move around and everything. So very, very nice.
Well, there we go. Okay, go back. Okay, so that gives you the idea. Oh, I just want to show you the pop-up. So the timer has to go down. This will take 10 seconds. Okay, and there we see the timer, and you see how the okay, and the message. So the old message that we had before, and we can say hello again. Okay, and that's the message app. And we'll get rid of that, Let's see. And I'm not going to show you BP Monitor. I'm going to show you BP Cloud. And I've already been authenticating. You saw the splash screen really quickly. So this is, and you can see the data from November 7th that we added earlier today in the talk. And let's see what the dialogue looks like.
And you can show them the charts, too.
And let's see what the charts look like. And we can go through the charts. And the bar chart. Okay, we go back to... And, we don't have enough data. Oh, we do. So you can see the floating header. And notice that the scroll bar disappears when you're not using it. And again, that's Gluon controls. Really nice header, floating headers. Okay.
Okay, great.
Now I'm going to try and go back to the machine.
Yeah, so wish us luck. Now we're going to unplug here and get back up on the projector. And so we just wanted to show you guys that, it all works. Write the programs, develop them in your IDE, deploy them to the devices, and it all works. And except we want to go to the summary. So I'll go back one slide here. Okay, all right, so let's just take a minute here before we wrap this up and summarize what we did for you today in this session. What the advantages of JavaFX, I think we got through pretty well. We showed you properties and controls, how to attach listeners to properties, and binding techniques. And remember that there are going to be asynchronous tasks that have to be done to keep the UI responsive. But JavaFX has all of those, and Gluon implements a lot of that stuff behind the scenes for you as well. We highly recommend that if you're going to be doing mobile development that you use frameworks. And we've shown you how powerful the Gluon framework is and how easy it is to use Gradle to do your builds. And we also think it's important to use Adam Bean's Afterburner framework for the dependency injection. And all of this, again, I want to emphasize, is platform and IDE independent. We demonstrated today in NetBeans, but you can also use, they have plugins for Eclipse and also IntelliJ. Okay, so we wanted to tell you about a related session. It will be on Java on Mobile. It will be on Thursday in room 7 from 1640 to 1740. And this will be another talk on using Java on mobile. Write once, run anywhere at your fingertips. And this will be presented by Johan Voss, who is actually one of the co-founders of Gluon. And Johan is with us right now, and we thought it would be a good idea for him to come on up here and answer some questions, because we're going to be breaking for Q&A here in a second. So yeah, Gluon's, we have somebody from Gluon here who you can ask some specific questions to if you want. In the meantime, while Johan's coming up here, let's wrap this up and tell everybody, yeah, you can be right up here. In fact, I have a chair for you. We want to thank everybody for coming. We've had a lot of fun doing this. It's really fun, and it really works. These are our contact information. So you're welcome to contact us if you have any questions or anything. Twitter handles and email. The tutorial examples and all of the demo code that we showed you today is going to be available on our website, asgteach.com, and they'll be on our homepage. There'll be something that says DevOps 2016
Yeah, it's
tutorial.
not there yet, but it'll be
yet.
there sometime today. I don't know exactly when, but so all the code will be available.
The other thing that we'll say really quickly is that Pearson is offering a discount for books and videos, up to a 40% discount for Devoxians. If you're interested in getting not only our books and materials, but others as well. So this is our JavaFX book, which is more for the client desktop side on the NetBeans platform. We don't do anything in this book for mobile. But if you wanted to learn more about how to use JavaFX and all the binding techniques that we showed you and everything, you're welcome to take a look at our JavaFX live lesson video. And once again, you can go to this website that we'll keep up here, and you can
Actually, I have the website.
Yeah, and then that's just enter DevOps, the code, and you can get a discount.
So these are all the books. So it's for all the DevOps speakers. If they have any books or videos, then they're 40% off, and you can go to this to see it.
Yep.
And here's ours. And so let me go back to the slide.
Yeah, so go ahead and put that back up. Okay, at this point, we've got some time left here to do some Q&A, and there is a microphone over here. If you ask a question, we probably should repeat it so that everybody can hear it, and we'll answer any questions you have. So fire away.
Don't be shy. No questions.
Okay,
Yes.
question?
Very simple one. What's the size of the application that you just installed?
Okay, the question was, what's the size of the application like the one which one, like any of them, or BP Cloud? Okay.
That would be in, how do I find that? Under
So could you go to a terminal window, or?
Yeah. Well, typically the size of an application created with Gluon Mobile is similar to the size created with native iOS or Android toolkits. Two reasons for this. First of all, we use JavaFX for the rendering instead of the native rendering system, but it's rendering on native hardware as well, so it doesn't add much overhead. And the second thing is that today the size of an application is not determined by the code, but by the resources. So if you add lots of pictures and movies, then the size will increase. But it's hardly ever a problem, the size of the application. So it's not much different from regular applications. It's really mainly determined by the resources that you add.
Thank you.
Okay, another question? Yes. Yeah, the question is about battery usage.
I don't think that's determined by this. I mean, I think it's more determined by what you're doing in your application. So you can access the hardware. In fact, I think you can access the battery status right in the hardware. But and it also depends on your phone. Like right now, my iPhone goes down really fast. I think I have a problem with the battery, but it's not the applications. It's the phone, right?
Yeah, it's typically the application. Also, some of the servers that we currently have are not yet optimized for high battery life, but we're improving them. So if the service goes into the background, we should consume less battery. So we can improve things there, but in general, it's again typically the same as for a regular application. You know that if you're using GPS and Bluetooth heavily, that you will consume the battery faster. There's some questions there.
Yeah, question over here.
Do you have anything special for like app life cycles, for like tombstoning to solve? Do you have any functions that allow you to do stuff while tombstoning or right before, of course?
Does Gluon have the question?
Yeah, does Gluon have stuff that includes the life cycle of applications, like the tombstoning phase where it is unloaded, basically?
Not sure I completely understand the question, but there's a lifecycle management API as part of Charm-Down, and that allows you to provide callbacks on to provide functionality that will be executed on the changes in life cycles. Apart from that, we have a feature in Gluon Cloud Link, which is a crash service, and when a crash or something unexpected happens, if possible, information is still sent to Gluon Cloud Link, and with the Cloud Link dashboard, you can still inspect it. So there's a crash analysis, which is dealt with by Gluon Connect on the client, and it sends it to Gluon Cloud Link. I'll talk about that on Thursday, briefly, probably.
Sorry, one more question as well. What about race conditions with the observable collection from Gluon? Like, is there a problem if someone connects to the same cloud storage variable and then uploads it after someone already adjusted it because he was offline and stuff like that?
Right. So first of all, race conditions in observables are not different from the race conditions in JavaFX. So you use the JavaFX application, try to update those values. Remote synchronization indeed is a bit more complicated because there can be different clients updating at the same moment the data. We are adding versioning to the synchronization process where you can determine we have a number of policies, and one of the policies is, for example, that you cannot do an update if you don't have the latest version. So if at that moment, if suppose all clients have the latest versions, and two are sending an update, and one arrives a nanosecond before the other ones, then the other one will be rejected because it doesn't have the latest version anymore when that arrives, and then the client is notified about this. This is, of course, very important in financial applications. In chat applications, it's less important, and there you don't use this policy. You just use the policy send and receive, because there, if the text arrives a bit later than the other text, it should still be accepted, even if the client didn't have the previous text already. He will be updated, and that's already dealt with. But the policy really determines if you want this to be transactional or non-transactional.
Okay, any other questions? Do you see any hands or anything? No. Okay. Okay, so, all right. Well, thanks for coming, and have a great time at the show, and have fun with this stuff. Thank you.